The day had been long, and Keanu Reeves was tired. After flying from one city to another for meetings and film commitments, he finally arrived at a small private jet terminal. Unlike the big, crowded airports, this terminal was quiet, almost empty, with only a few people moving around. It was supposed to be simple, fast, and private, just the way Keanu liked it. He wasn't in the mood for chaos. He wanted a smooth flight and a little peace before boarding his jet. Keanu walked slowly toward the check-in counter, carrying a small bag over his shoulder. He was dressed simply in a hoodie and jeans, with a cap pulled low over his face. No sunglasses, no entourage, no flashing cameras. Just a regular man who had had a long day. But the staff behind the counter didn't know that. To them, he looked like any other traveler who might have wandered into the wrong place. "Next!" one of the attendants called impatiently, not even looking up from the computer screen. When Keanu stepped forward, they glanced at him briefly and then frowned. There was a hint of annoyance in their eyes, as if he were interrupting their routine. "Hi, I have a booking for the flight to Los Angeles," Keanu said politely. His voice was soft, calm, and respectful, the kind of voice that made people want to listen. The attendant's expression did not change. "Name?" she asked, clearly thinking he might not belong here. "Keanu Reeves," he replied. The staff exchanged a quick glance, whispering to each other. One of them, a young man, rolled his eyes and muttered under his breath, "Yeah, right." He assumed Keanu was joking or trying to sneak into the terminal. "Sir, are you sure you're in the right place?" the attendant asked, her tone not rude but impatient. She tapped on the computer, pretending to check something, but there was no urgency in her movements. She clearly expected him to be a regular traveler who had made a mistake. Keanu nodded calmly. "Yes, I'm sure. I booked this flight a few days ago." He handed over his boarding information, keeping his cool. His eyes were gentle, kind, and patient. He didn't show the slightest hint of anger. Even though he could feel the staff's skepticism and subtle disrespect, the attendant scanned the paper and then looked up at him, clearly trying to hide her doubt. You're holding up other passengers. Can you wait over there?" she said, pointing toward a small waiting area. Her words were polite enough, but her body language said everything. She did not believe he belonged there, and she assumed he would cause trouble. Keanu didn't argue. He simply nodded and moved toward the waiting area. He could feel the eyes of the staff following him, and he could sense the tension. Other travelers had started to notice the situation too, whispering among themselves and stealing glances at the man they thought was just another confused passenger. He sat down on one of the chairs and pulled out a small notebook from his bag. It wasn't anything fancy, just a simple notebook with a pen. He began to write quietly, jotting down thoughts, sketches, or reminders from his day. It was his way to pass the time and stay calm. As he wrote, he observed the people around him, the staff moving hurriedly, the travelers checking their phones, the occasional flight attendant carrying drinks or documents. A cleaner was nearby, sweeping the floor with slow, careful movements. She glanced at Keanu for a moment and froze. There was something familiar about him, a quiet presence that seemed different from the usual crowd. But she hesitated. She wasn't sure if she should speak up. Maybe she was imagining it. Maybe he was really just a regular traveler after all. Meanwhile, the staff behind the counter continued their work, showing no signs that they recognized who he was. They treated him like any other passenger, if not a little worse. They whispered to each other, clearly frustrated that this confused person was taking up their time. One of them said quietly, "I don't know why he's even here. He's slowing everything down." Another nodded, her face tight with impatience. Keanu noticed the whispers but didn't react. He had learned a long time ago that patience often says more than anger ever could. He smiled politely at a couple of travelers who looked at him curiously and returned to his notebook. He didn't want to draw attention, but somehow his calm demeanor made the situation feel even stranger to the staff. Minutes passed, and Keanu continued waiting. His presence was like a quiet wave in the terminal, calm, unassuming, and firm. The staff grew more restless. One of the attendants glanced at the boarding screen and then back at him. "Are you seriously still here?" she muttered, loud enough for him to hear. Keanu looked up, his expression gentle. Yes, I'm waiting for my flight, he said simply. No frustration, no drama? Just a calm statement of fact. This response seemed to confuse the staff. They were used to travelers complaining, arguing, or trying to sneak around rules. But here was a man who did nothing but wait quietly, polite and respectful. His behavior challenged their assumptions. Another traveler, sitting nearby, whispered to a friend, "That guy looks so familiar. I swear I've seen him in movies." The friend shrugged, unsure. Meanwhile, Keanu continued to write, lost in his own quiet world, completely unfazed by the doubts and whispers around him. The staff, growing more impatient, finally called the manager. "There's someone here causing delays," one of them said, a hint of exasperation in her voice. "I don't know who he thinks he is, but he's holding everything up." The manager walked over, a serious expression on his face. He glanced at Keanu and then at the staff. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked. "He says he has a booking," one attendant explained, pointing toward Keanu. "But I don't think he belongs here. He's been waiting for a long time and slowing everything down." The manager turned to Keanu. "Sir, can I see your ticket?" Keanu handed it over calmly. The manager scanned it and paused. His eyes widened slightly. "Wait a minute. This says Keanu Reeves." The staff behind the counter froze. One of them whispered, "No way." The other stared in disbelief. They had been dismissing someone they had no idea was a world-famous actor. Someone who had been polite, patient, and completely respectful the entire time. Even the cleaner, who had recognized him earlier but stayed quiet, couldn't help but smile softly. She watched quietly, realizing that the person everyone had been judging was not just any traveler, he was someone extraordinary. But in a way that had nothing to do with fame or money. Keanu remained calm, writing quietly in his notebook. He didn't flaunt his identity, didn't demand special treatment. His actions spoke for him. His patience and humility were stronger than any celebrity status. The manager, now aware of who he was dealing with, turned to the staff. "I think we need to treat him properly," he said firmly. "Immediately." But even in that moment, Keanu didn't raise his voice, didn't demand attention. He simply waited, giving everyone around him a subtle lesson in kindness, patience, and humility. As the situation began to shift, and the staff scrambled to correct their mistake, Keanu quietly finished writing in his notebook. He glanced around once, smiled softly at the cleaner who had recognized him, and returned to his calm demeanor. It was just the beginning of an unforgettable day, a day that would leave the staff reflecting on their behavior long after the flight took off. But for now, Keanu Reeves remained just a man waiting quietly for his flight, showing the world in the simplest way possible that respect, patience, and kindness are far more powerful than fame or wealth. And in that quiet, small terminal, everyone who had been watching learned an important lesson, sometimes the most remarkable. People are the ones who don't need to announce who they are. After the manager realized who Keanu Reeves really was, the atmosphere in the small terminal shifted immediately. The staff suddenly became nervous, their earlier confidence replaced by embarrassment. They whispered among themselves, glancing at Keanu with wide eyes, realizing they had been rude and dismissive to a world-famous actor. But Keanu didn't react. He stayed in his chair, calm and quiet, flipping through his notebook as if nothing had happened. His calmness only made the staff feel more awkward. One attendant, a young woman with a clipboard in her hand, tried to approach him. Her hands were shaking slightly and she avoided eye contact. "Mr. Reeves, we are very sorry about earlier," she said quickly, her voice nervous. We didn't know it was you." "It won't happen again." Keanu looked up at her, a soft smile on his face. "It's okay," he said gently. "I understand. Mistakes happen." His voice was calm, friendly, and forgiving. There was no anger, no resentment, just kindness. The staff exchanged glances, whispering urgently, "How can he be so calm?" "We were rude to him," one said. "He could have yelled at us or demanded special treatment, and he's just smiling." The other nodded, ashamed. They had expected anger, but instead they saw grace. Meanwhile, The cleaner, who had recognized him earlier, couldn't help but smile quietly. She had seen Keanu in interviews, movies, and on the news, but seeing him in person, so calm and humble, was different. He didn't act like a celebrity at all. He didn't seem to want attention. He was just himself. The staff began to scramble. They pulled up Keanu's flight details on their computer, double-checking everything, making sure there were no more mistakes. The young woman with the clipboard fumbled with the paperwork, dropping a pen and picking it up quickly, embarrassed. Her colleague tried to apologize again. "We'll make sure your check-in is fast now," he said. "Please forgive our mistake." Keanu nodded again. "I appreciate it," he said simply. He wasn't demanding any special treatment. He wasn't asking them to act differently because of his fame. He just wanted to board his flight like any other passenger. Even as the staff worked, they couldn't stop whispering about him. "He's really Keanu Reeves," one muttered. "And he's so kind. He didn't yell at us. He didn't make a scene." One of the attendants shook her head. "We should have treated him with respect from the beginning. Fame doesn't matter, but his calmness, his humility, it's remarkable." While the staff was busy trying to fix the situation, a few travelers in the waiting area had begun noticing what was happening. Whispers started spreading like wildfire. "Is that really Keanu Reeves?" someone asked quietly. Another nodded, eyes wide. "Yes, that's him. He's just sitting there quietly. Look at him, he's normal." Keanu noticed the attention but didn't let it distract him. He returned to his notebook, scribbling quietly, completely unbothered. He seemed like any other person waiting for their flight, but there was something in his presence that made people notice, not because of fame, but because of how calm and genuine he was. The manager decided to step in personally. "Sir, I apologize for the way the staff treated you earlier," he said politely. "We'll make sure everything is handled smoothly from here. You won't have to wait any longer." Keanu smiled softly. "Thank you," he said. "I really appreciate that." "It's okay. I understand mistakes happen." The staff continued to fuss over the boarding process. They pulled up his ticket, double-checked his documents, and even offered a lounge pass, hoping to make amends. Keanu politely declined. "I'm fine waiting here," he said. "It's all right." His humility only deepened the staff's embarrassment. They realized that their impatience and rudeness had been unnecessary. Meanwhile, the cleaner, who had been quietly observing the scene, finally approached him cautiously. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly. I recognized you. I didn't want to say anything earlier, but it's really you, isn't it?" Keanu looked up at her and nodded. "Yes, it is," he said gently. His smile was warm and kind. "Thank you for noticing." The cleaner's face lit up. She felt a rush of excitement, but also relief. "It's just amazing to see you in person. And you're so calm. You didn't get angry at anyone." "It's really inspiring," she said, her voice soft but full of admiration. Keanu shook his head slightly. "I try to stay calm. People have tough days, and sometimes we all make mistakes. I just think it's important to be patient and kind." His words were simple, but they carried weight. The cleaner smiled again, feeling like she had just learned an important lesson. Back at the counter, the staff was finally catching up. They finished processing his documents and handed him the boarding pass. "Everything is ready, sir. You can board whenever you like," the young attendant said, her voice still a little shaky. Keanu nodded. "Thank you," he said simply. He picked up his small bag and stood, moving slowly toward the gate. He didn't rush. He didn't demand special treatment. He walked calmly with quiet dignity. The staff watched him go, their faces red with embarrassment. "We were so rude to him," one said quietly. "And he didn't even care. He didn't yell at us or demand anything. He just stayed calm." The manager sighed. "We need to learn from this. Fame isn't what makes a person remarkable. It's how they treat others, how they react when things go wrong." Even as Keanu walked away, the cleaner followed him with her eyes. She felt a deep sense of admiration. Seeing someone so famous being so humble and kind had left an impression she would never forget. as he disappeared toward the gate. The staff gathered together, whispering about what had just happened. "We need to change how we treat people," one said. "Not because they're famous, but because respect matters." "We forgot that earlier." The young woman with the clipboard nodded. "Yes, and the way he handled everything. It's inspiring. I want to be like that, calm and kind, even when people are rude to me." The day that started with awkwardness and misunderstanding had turned into a lesson for everyone in the terminal. Keanu Reeves, without raising his voice or demanding attention, had reminded them of something simple but powerful: kindness, patience, and humility make a bigger impact than anger, status, or fame. Even the travelers waiting nearby were talking quietly. "Did you see that?" One whispered. "He didn't act like a celebrity at all. He just stayed calm, like nothing mattered. But somehow it mattered more than anything else." Keanu's calmness left a ripple effect. It wasn't just about being famous or being recognized. It was about showing respect to others even when others don't recognize you. His behavior was a quiet lesson that everyone could understand, no matter who they were. By the time his flight was called, the atmosphere in the terminal had completely changed. The staff no longer saw him as just another passenger. They saw him as a person, humble, kind, and patient, someone who had turned a potentially embarrassing situation into a teaching moment. Keanu smiled softly at the staff as he walked toward the jet. "Thank you for your help," he said quietly. The words were simple, but they carried sincerity. He didn't need to say more. The staff understood. The cleaner waved at him from across the room. Keanu waved back, a small, genuine gesture that left her smiling long after he disappeared through the gate. As the jet took off later that afternoon, the staff and travelers who had witnessed the entire event reflected on what had happened. They realized that being rude or impatient only created tension, while kindness and patience could turn even the most awkward moments into something meaningful. And in that quiet, small terminal, everyone learned an unforgettable lesson. Sometimes the greatest power a person has is not in their fame, wealth, or status, but in the simple way they treat others, with patience, respect, and humility. The atmosphere in the terminal was tense. Even after the staff realized they had been dismissive of Keanu Reeves, the embarrassment still hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Whispers passed between attendants, some shaking their heads in disbelief. They had been rude, impatient, and dismissive of someone who had remained calm, polite, and completely unassuming. And now, the reality was sinking in. They hadn't just been rude to any traveler. They had been rude to a movie star known worldwide. Someone who had touched millions with his work, yet treated them with nothing but respect. The manager stood near the counter, trying to regain some control over the situation. His face was serious, but even he couldn't hide the mixture of awe and guilt. "We need to fix this immediately," he said. "Double-check everything, and make sure there are no mistakes from here on out. And treat him with the respect he deserves. Not because he's famous, but because every passenger deserves respect." Meanwhile, Keanu sat quietly in the waiting area, flipping through his notebook. He was calm, serene, and unbothered by the sudden tension around him. He didn't seem to want attention, and yet his presence had a strange power. People couldn't help but notice him, not just because they recognized his face, but because of the way he carried himself: humble, patient, and kind. The staff began to scramble. They called the boarding crew, double-checked the jet's schedule, and made sure everything was ready for a smooth boarding process. But the earlier disrespect had already left a mark. Some staff members whispered among themselves, apologizing quietly for their behavior. Others looked down, embarrassed, realizing how poorly they had treated someone who didn't ask for special treatment and had been nothing but polite. One of the attendants, a young woman who had been particularly impatient earlier, hesitated before approaching him. Her hands shook slightly and she avoided eye contact. "Mr. Reeves," she said softly, almost nervously, We are very sorry for earlier. We didn't realize who you were, and we made a mistake. I hope you can forgive us." Keanu looked up at her with a gentle smile. His eyes were calm and warm, full of understanding. "It's all right," he said softly. I understand. Mistakes happen. Thank you for saying that. His voice was quiet, but it carried sincerity and kindness that made her feel immediately relieved. Other staff members were watching the interaction, their faces red with shame. They had expected anger, a raised voice, or a demand for special treatment. But here was a man who had been polite, calm, and patient the entire time, and now he was forgiving them. One staff member whispered, almost to himself, "I don't understand. How can someone be so calm after we treated him so badly?" The cleaner, who had recognized him earlier, finally decided to speak. She approached quietly, unsure if she should. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly. I recognized you earlier. I didn't want to say anything, but it's really you, isn't it?" Keanu looked up and nodded. "Yes, it is," he said gently. His smile was warm and genuine. "Thank you for noticing." The cleaner's face lit up. She felt a rush of excitement, but also a sense of relief. Seeing him in person, seeing how calm and humble he was, made her feel like she was witnessing something special. "It's amazing," she said softly. You're so calm and you didn't get angry at anyone. That's really inspiring." Keanu shook his head slightly. "I try to stay calm. Everyone has difficult days and sometimes people make mistakes. I just think it's important to be patient and kind." His words were simple, but they carried a quiet weight that everyone around him could feel. Meanwhile, the staff continued their work, processing his documents carefully, making sure that nothing went wrong this time. They double-checked every detail, asked questions politely, and moved with unusual care. They wanted to make up for their earlier behavior, and they also couldn't stop staring at him from time to time. They whispered among themselves again. "I can't believe we treated him like that. He didn't get angry. He didn't demand anything. And he's so kind." Keanu noticed their glances but didn't let it distract him. He returned to his notebook, quietly writing, drawing, or making notes. His calm presence seemed to have a strange effect on everyone in the terminal. Even the travelers waiting nearby were noticing. Some recognized him immediately, others whispered to their friends. "Isn't that Keanu Reeves?" One asked softly. "Yes," another whispered, "and he's just sitting there quietly. He hasn't made a scene at all." The manager decided to intervene further. "Sir," he said, stepping forward, "we want to make sure your boarding goes smoothly. Please let us handle everything from here. You won't have to wait any longer." Keanu smiled faintly. "Thank you," he said. "I really appreciate that. I'm fine, though." "It's all right." His humility left the manager momentarily speechless. He wasn't just polite. He was genuinely kind, unassuming, and understanding. Even after being treated unfairly, the staff continued to fuss over him, offering small gestures of apology. A lounge pass, a priority seating option, assistance with his bag. But Keanu declined politely. "I'm okay." "Thank you," he said quietly. His refusal wasn't arrogant or rude. It was simply a demonstration of his principle. He didn't need special treatment. And he didn't want anyone to feel pressured. Even the travelers were noticing. Some were amazed that someone so famous could act so normally. They whispered to each other, their voices hushed. "I can't believe how calm he is," one said. "He's famous, and yet he doesn't act like it matters." It's inspiring. The cleaner, still standing nearby, smiled softly. She had watched the entire scene unfold. She realized that the lesson wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about how to treat others, about patience and kindness in moments where people might expect anger or entitlement. Keanu was teaching everyone, without even trying, how to be human in the best sense. The staff grew more attentive as the boarding time approached. They made sure all his documents were correct, double-checked his seat, and even prepared his luggage carefully. They moved with unusual care, and yet Keanu remained calm. He didn't rush them. He didn't pressure anyone. He simply waited, allowing the process to happen at its own pace. Finally, everything was ready. The boarding crew called his name politely, and Keanu stood, picking up his small bag. He moved slowly, deliberately, with quiet dignity. He didn't rush. He didn't make a scene. He simply walked toward the gate, smiling softly at the cleaner, who waved at him. He waved back gently. The staff watched in awe. "We treated him like any other person, and he treated us like humans," one said quietly. "Even though we were wrong, he didn't make us feel small. He just stayed calm." "It's incredible." The manager nodded. "We have a lot to learn," he said. "It's not about fame. It's about respect, patience, and kindness. Today we've been reminded of that in the most powerful way." As Keanu boarded the jet, the terminal returned to its usual rhythm, but the lesson lingered. The staff, the cleaner, and even the travelers carried with them a quiet sense of admiration and inspiration. They realized that being humble and kind was more powerful than any title, any celebrity, or any authority, even after he was gone. The terminal buzzed quietly with conversations about what had happened. "Did you see how calm he was?" One staff member asked another. "And how kind. We've never seen anything like that before." The young woman who had apologized to him earlier nodded. "It's amazing. He didn't need to say much, and yet we learned a lot just from the way he acted. It makes me want to be a better person, a better employee, and a kinder human being." The cleaner smiled to herself. She had witnessed something rare, a true example of humility, patience, and kindness. Seeing someone famous behave with such grace had reminded her that no matter who a person is, their character is what really matters. And as the jet disappeared into the sky, carrying Keanu Reeves to his next destination, the staff, the travelers, and the cleaner all felt that they had experienced something unforgettable. They had learned a lesson that went far beyond celebrity, a lesson about how to treat others, how to act with dignity, and how to remain kind, even when others make mistakes. The terminal was buzzing with quiet tension. Ever since the manager realized that Keanu Reeves was sitting quietly in the waiting area, the staff had been in a state of panic and embarrassment. They had spent years working with travelers of all kinds, but they had never misjudged someone like this. And now, as they tried to make amends, they couldn't help but feel the weight of their earlier behavior. Keanu, meanwhile, remained calm. He had noticed the hurried whispers, the nervous glances, and the soft apologies. But he didn't make anyone feel pressured. He didn't act demanding or entitled. Instead, he sat quietly in his chair, flipping through his notebook, writing little notes, or sometimes just observing the people around him. He moved like someone who was fully present in the moment. Unaffected by the chaos his identity had suddenly created, one attendant, a young man who had been particularly impatient earlier, approached him hesitantly. His face was red with embarrassment. "Mr. Reeves, we're very sorry for how we treated you," he stammered. We didn't know. We didn't recognize you. We were wrong." Keanu looked up at him and smiled gently. "It's all right," he said softly. "I understand. Mistakes happen." "Thank you for saying that." The young man blinked in surprise. He had expected anger, frustration, or perhaps a demand for special treatment. But instead he saw calmness, patience, and understanding. And in that moment he felt a mix of shame and admiration. He realized that no amount of fame, wealth, or recognition could ever replace kindness and humility. Meanwhile, the cleaner who had been observing quietly decided to step closer again. She had recognized him earlier but had stayed silent, unsure of how to act. "Sir," she said softly, "I just wanted to say, you've been so kind and calm, even though people were rude. It's really inspiring." Keanu nodded slightly. "I try to stay calm. Everyone has difficult days and sometimes people make mistakes. We all have moments where we could react differently. I just think it's important to be patient and kind." His words were simple, but they carried a quiet strength that seemed to touch everyone nearby. The staff was now fully attentive, almost trembling as they hurried to complete his boarding process. They pulled up his ticket, double-checked the seating arrangements, and carefully handled his luggage. One attendant offered a lounge pass, another tried to help him with his carry-on. But Keanu politely declined all the extras. "I'm fine, thank you," he said quietly. He didn't want anyone to feel pressured or uncomfortable. He just wanted a smooth, calm process like any other passenger got as he prepared to board. The staff realized something important. This wasn't just about him being famous. It was about how he handled the situation. They had been impatient, dismissive, and rude, and he had responded with nothing but kindness. His patience had made them reflect on their own behavior. Showing them the difference between respect and entitlement, the manager stepped forward, clearly trying to regain control. "Mr. Reeves, I want to apologize personally for how our staff treated you earlier," he said. "We will make sure this never happens again." Keanu looked at him and smiled faintly. "Thank you. That's kind of you. But I don't want anyone to feel badly. Mistakes happen, and what matters is how we treat each other going forward." The manager nodded, silently impressed. He had expected an angry confrontation or a request for special treatment, but instead he saw grace, humility, and wisdom. It was a reminder that character is measured not by status, but by how a person acts when things go wrong. The staff watched in awe as Keanu stood to leave. He moved slowly, with quiet dignity, picking up his small bag and adjusting his hoodie. There was no rush, no display of entitlement, no demand for attention. Yet, in that moment, the entire terminal felt a shift. His calmness and humility seemed to fill the room, creating a sense of respect and reflection among everyone present. The cleaner waved at him once more. Keanu looked up, gave her a warm smile, and waved back gently. The simple exchange was powerful. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about human connection, about acknowledging kindness and presence. Some of the travelers who had been watching the scene unfold whispered to each other. "Did you see that?" One said quietly. "He didn't act like a celebrity at all. He didn't demand anything. He just stayed calm." "Yes," another replied. "And yet, he taught everyone in this terminal a lesson about respect and kindness. That's more than any lecture or rule could ever do." The staff was still trying to process everything. They had been rude, dismissive, and impatient, and now they felt both ashamed and inspired. One attendant whispered, "I hope I can be that patient and kind someday. Even if someone is rude to me, I want to respond like he did." The young woman with the clipboard nodded. "It's amazing," she said softly. "He didn't need to say much, but we learned something important just by watching him." As Keanu reached the boarding gate, the staff made a final attempt to apologize again. "Sir, please accept our apologies," one said nervously. "We truly respect you, and will do better in the future." Keanu looked at them and nodded gently. "Thank you," he said. "Just remember to treat everyone with respect. That's all that matters." The words were simple, but they carried deep meaning. It wasn't about fame, money, or recognition. It was about treating others as human beings with patience, kindness, and understanding. As the jet doors opened, Keanu walked inside. The staff and travelers continued to watch quietly, reflecting on what had just happened. They realized that a simple act of humility could have a far greater impact than any display of power or fame. The cleaner smiled to herself, feeling inspired. Seeing someone so famous remain humble and kind had left a lasting impression. She understood that true greatness wasn't measured by awards or recognition, but by how a person treats others. Especially in moments of tension or misunderstanding, the staff gathered quietly, whispering among themselves. "We need to change the way we treat people," one said. "It doesn't matter if someone is famous or not. Respect, patience, and kindness should come first." "Yes," another replied. "And the way he handled everything, it's unforgettable. I want to remember this lesson every day." Even as the jet began its engines, the story of the quiet, patient man in the terminal lingered. Keanu Reeves, without demanding attention, without displaying anger, had reminded everyone of something simple but powerful. The way we treat others matters far more than who we are or what we have. The staff, travelers, and cleaner all carried that lesson with them. It wasn't just about celebrity or fame. It was about human connection, humility, and respect. And it was a lesson they would remember for the rest of their lives. In that quiet terminal, everyone had witnessed something extraordinary, not a grand act, not a dramatic gesture, but the quiet power of patience. kindness, and humility. Keanu Reeves had shown them that being human, truly human, is more important than any title or status, and as the jet disappeared into the sky, leaving the terminal behind, the staff and travelers felt inspired to be better, kinder, and more patient with everyone they met. They had learned that even small acts of understanding and respect could leave a lasting impression, a lesson that fame or fortune could never teach, but that a quiet, humble human being could. After Keanu Reeves boarded the jet, the terminal slowly began to return to its usual rhythm. The quiet hum of conversation, the rolling luggage, and the occasional announcements filled the space once again. But something had changed. The staff, travelers, and even the cleaner who had witnessed the events were no longer moving through the day as they usually did. There was a sense of reflection, a feeling that they had learned something important, something that went far beyond flights and schedules. The staff, still shaken from the earlier incident, gathered near the counter. Their faces showed a mixture of embarrassment and awe. They had treated a man dismissively, assuming he was just another ordinary traveler, and now they realized they had been wrong. But more than that, they understood something even deeper. Keanu had been more than just polite. He had been patient, kind, and humble. And in doing so, he had given them a lesson they would never forget. One of the attendants, the young woman who had first apologized, spoke quietly to her colleague. "Do you understand what he did?" she asked softly. "He didn't demand anything. He didn't yell. He didn't act like he was above us, and yet he made us feel like we could be better people." Her colleague nodded slowly. "Yes, it's like he taught us something without even trying. He just showed us how to act with patience and kindness even when people are rude. That's more than anyone could expect." The manager, who had been observing everything, called the staff together. "Today we learned an important lesson," he said, his voice calm but serious. "It's not about who someone is, how famous they are, or how much money they have. It's about how we treat people." Keanu Reeves reminded us that respect, patience, and kindness matter more than anything else. And it's our responsibility to carry that lesson forward. The staff nodded, some wiping their foreheads, others exchanging quiet looks. The realization was heavy, but it was also inspiring. They had been reminded that even small actions like speaking politely, listening patiently, or offering help without judgment can make a huge difference in someone's day. Meanwhile, the cleaner who had recognized Keanu earlier was quietly sweeping the floor nearby. She had watched everything unfold, amazed by the quiet dignity and humility of the man she had admired from afar. She thought about the way he had remained calm, even when treated unfairly, and how he had treated everyone, from the impatient staff to the travelers, with patience and kindness. She smiled softly to herself. "It's not just about fame," she whispered. "It's about being human. That's what makes someone truly remarkable." The travelers in the terminal were talking quietly among themselves. Some were still in awe that they had seen Keanu Reeves in person, while others were discussing the lesson his behavior had given them. "Did you see how calm he was?" one traveler said. "He didn't act like a celebrity at all. He didn't demand attention or special treatment, and yet he taught everyone a lesson about patience and respect." "Yes," another agreed. "It's amazing. You can tell someone is truly great not by what they have, but by how they treat others, and he's a perfect example." As the hours passed, the terminal slowly returned to its normal pace, but the impact of the encounter lingered. The staff began to move differently, speaking more politely to passengers, offering help without waiting to be asked, and treating everyone with a renewed sense of respect. They were no longer just employees doing a job, they were human beings interacting with other human beings. Inspired by the quiet example they had witnessed, the manager decided to take action. He gathered the staff for a brief meeting and spoke to them with sincerity. "Today was a reminder of what matters most," he said. "It's not about rules, schedules, or efficiency alone. It's about kindness, patience, and respect. Let's make a promise to ourselves and to our passengers that we will act with the same calmness and understanding that Mr. Reeves showed us today." The staff nodded, their faces serious. They had learned a lesson they would carry with them for the rest of their careers. They realized that even small moments like a polite word, a patient gesture, or a simple smile could make a world of difference in someone's day. The cleaner continued her work. Still thinking about Keanu, she remembered the warmth in his eyes, the soft smile, and the quiet way he treated everyone around him. She thought about how rare it was to meet someone who could remain so humble, so kind, and so patient, even when others made mistakes. Later that evening, when the terminal had mostly emptied, the manager stayed behind for a moment, reflecting on the day's events. He thought about how easy it is to judge people quickly, to assume things based on appearances, and to forget the importance of simple kindness. He realized that Keanu Reeves had done something extraordinary, not by demanding respect, but by showing it through his actions. The staff began to practice what they had learned. When the next passenger arrived, they greeted them politely, offered assistance without waiting for a request, and treated them with the same calmness and patience that Keanu had shown. They felt a quiet sense of pride in doing something right, inspired by a man who had reminded them that respect and kindness are the greatest gifts we can give to others, even long after the terminal closed that night. The story of Keanu Reeves' visit spread quietly among the staff. They spoke about it to their friends and family, about how a simple act of patience and humility could leave a lasting impression. They realized that fame or recognition didn't make someone great. It was their actions, their character, and the way they treated others that truly mattered. The cleaner, finishing her shift, thought once more about the man she had seen. She realized that even though she would never forget his face or his kindness, the lesson was bigger than him as a celebrity. It was about how to live as a person, how to respond with calmness, how to act with patience, and how to treat everyone with respect. No matter who they were. In the days and weeks that followed, the staff continued to reflect on what had happened. Each time they greeted a passenger politely, offered help, or stayed patient in a stressful situation, they thought about Keanu Reeves and the quiet example he had set. The memory of that day became a guide, a reminder that even small actions of kindness could have a profound impact. Travelers who returned to the terminal noticed the difference too. The staff seemed calmer, more attentive, and genuinely kind. The atmosphere felt warmer, more human. And though most passengers would never know the story of the man who had inspired this change, the effect of his quiet humility and patience was visible in every interaction. It was a reminder that greatness doesn't always come from loud gestures, dramatic speeches, or public recognition. Sometimes greatness is quiet. Sometimes it's found in the way someone treats others when no one is watching. Sometimes it's found in patience, humility, and kindness, the very qualities Keanu Reeves had shown that day. And in that small terminal, a lesson that started with misunderstanding and impatience ended with reflection, inspiration, and a lasting change. The staff had learned to treat every passenger with respect. The travelers noticed the difference, and the cleaner carried a story she would never forget. Even as the jet carrying Keanu Reeves disappeared into the sky, leaving the terminal behind, the impact of his visit remained. His quiet patience, his gentle words, and his simple acts of kindness had created a ripple effect, one that touched everyone present and would continue to influence how they treated others long into the future. In the end, the story was not about fame, money, or recognition. It was about humanity. It was about how one person, through calmness, humility, and respect, could change the way people saw the world, even if only for a moment. And that the staff, the travelers, and the cleaner realized was far more powerful than any celebrity could ever be. The lesson lingered quietly, like a soft echo in the terminal. Kindness, patience, and respect are always noticed. They matter more than status, appearances, or assumptions. And one small act of humility can inspire a lifetime of change, and that is exactly what Keanu Reeves had done that day, without a word of complaint, without a demand, simply by being the person he was meant to be: kind, patient, and human.